America. I started the Funky Academic because when I was in college and in graduate school, words were thrown around, and often I was confused. I studied philosophy, so a lot of my classroom experience included white guys tossing off with various degrees of precision words like justice and modernity and grew. And I suspected that the more they confused each other and myself, the less effective I would be at dismantling white supremacy. I started the Funky Academic so that other people would be less confused by these utterances and thereby be able to better dismantle white supremacy. It will indeed take a village. We talk about modern art, modern politics, modern life, and modern civilization, even modern families. But what is modernity? Hit the beat. I'm expressing with my full capability. The characteristic feature of modernity is that self-determination becomes the normative ground for all things. By normative ground, I mean that self-determination or freedom is that which makes good things good. Now, the word determination comes from the Latin de and terminare and bears the sense of limiting down. One thing I didn't understand until I kept studying philosophy was that limits are productive. From Aristotle in the 4th century BC to Foucault in the 20th century AD, you come to see how an object's limits are the object's properties. Determination is simply a fancy word for property. For example, right now I'm hungry. Hungry is a property of irony. This drive to eat limits my actions. This hunger fixes whether I decide to eat a sandwich, go for a run, or read a book. Because of this drive for food, I will eat. If I were unlimited by my hunger or undetermined, you would say that I was not hungry. So the property that is predicated of irony, the property of being hungry, is tied to the limits this drive to eat places on my action. That's why determination is simply a fancy name for property. Now, to say that self-determination is the normative ground is to say that self-determination is the thing that makes good things good. Now let's consider the difference between being determined by yourself, that is being autonomous, meaning giving the law to yourself, or if you're determined by an other, that is heteronymous. If your actions are determined by another, for example nature, there's nothing particularly good about these actions. Now it's easy for people to fetishize nature, but there's nothing particularly good about nature. Heart attacks are natural, so is teeth rot. When you see a lion rip into a gazelle's hindquarters, that is natural. Nature is amoral and often horrifying. So if I say that my actions were determined by nature, that doesn't mean that the actions were good, that just means that they were immediate and unreflective. So the characteristic feature of modernity is that self-determination makes good things good. Not nature, not custom, not some man's authority. To be clear, when we talk about the tie between modernity and self-determination, that doesn't mean I get to do what I want when I want to because I want to. Since all of my choices are constructed through a context in a world I share with everyone else, I just can't receive the context, make choices within that context, and then say that that's self-determination. Rather, self-determination entails making choices within a context as well as the responsibility to participate in the collective process of shaping the context within which we each make our individual choices. Self-determination carries the responsibility to be politically active. We are analytic philosophers, so let's draw some distinctions. Pre-modernity means that things are good because they've been determined by local conventions or received family ties or received notions of communal responsibilities. In modernity, things are good because they are self-determined. In post-modernity, freedom is understood to be nonsense and it's all just will to power. Freedom is a story for suckers so that the powerful can get others to do what they want. Modernity may sound great, but it has issues. Since self-determination is such a big deal, what is a self? And does it include my good habits and my bad habits? How do you make sense of freedom in a world where everything seems to be determined? These are modern questions. Since modernity is an advanced stage of political life, the only way to get to modernity is to go through pre-modernity. And nobody really shakes off all of the vestiges of their pre-modern context. That's why we have such a legacy of patriarchy and white supremacy in a supposed land of the free. Lastly, modernity can transform previous oppressive systems into new oppressive systems. For example, the nuclear family is a modern institution. The nuclear family seems to promote freedom by allowing young adults to be emancipated from their familial obligations of their greater clan or community. Although these greater familial relationships come in really handy in terms of childcare or other domestic issues. And if all of that reproductive labor that used to be divided among a clan or a community now gets shunted to one isolated woman, then modernity has found a way to make nuclear patriarchy even worse than when the clan or community chipped in and did laundry, raised kids, and cleaned. To recap, modernity is characterized by having self-determination as its normative ground. All modern societies emerge from pre-modern societies. And since there's a diversity of pre-modern societies, modern societies can look like a diversity of institutions and appearances as long as the society is characterized by self-determination as its normative ground. Thanks for watching this week's episode. Find me on Facebook or Twitter, and I'll keep you posted on the next installment of The Funky Academic.